have you ever been to, I want to say, like a village, town, small town that you kind of got a feeling where you were driving through and you were like, if the Chainsaw Massacre would be like a real thing, it would happen here?
Yes, actually.
Oh, is it in Alberta?
I don't even remember where it is, but I remember my sister and we were driving somewhere. We were trying to get somewhere, and we went down the back road, and then we pulled into this area where like cows were that were very close to us. And we're like, oh, that's weird. And then there was this church, and it looked really spooky, and I was like, we need to get out of here before we're murdered. This looks like a start of a horror movie.
It kind of reminds me of Outlast 2.
Oh my god, yeah.
Like the cannibal cult or whatever they have going on there. Well, for once, I'm not talking about a cult today. Surprise. But I will be talking about a small town and the horrors that occurred there. See, nestled in the serene and rugged landscape of California's Nevada mountains, we're just gonna say that, there is a place called Keddie, and I probably mispronounced that. It's spelled Keddie, in which there's a small rural railtown road. Much like that, a lot of the young residents there don't typically stay there because there isn't a lot going on. But what it does offer is, quote unquote, or at least what it used to do, is a quiet retreat in which, the rhythm of life just kind of follows the seasons. Everyone gives each other food in the winter. And then come in the summertime, everyone's out farming, doing whatever. But on a spring night in April 1981, this idyllic kind of life came to a end in what transpired within cabin 28 of the Keddie Resort, and it would become California's most chilling and, to this day, unsolved mystery. It was a quadruple homicide, so brutal that, to this day, people are still putting it on the bottom of their most disturbing, unsolved true crime icebergs to this day. Like I said, the horror unfolded over a night in April, which is debated whether it's the 11th or the 12th, in 1981, leaving 3 members of the Sharp family and a young friend dead. There was a 4th victim, 12-year-old Tina Sharp, who vanished without a trace. Decades have passed, but I still have questions. Like, who freaking did this? Why? Was it done with so much hostility? And despite new leads and, how things have gotten comparatively better as far as forensics goes, that there's still no justice. The Keddie murders stand as a reminder that even the most peaceful towns can still host the most unimaginable violence, which leaves behind a legacy of unanswered questions and a community forever marked by its unsettling silence. Hi, and welcome to the Decomposing Flower podcast. We're excited to have you with us as we delve into some truly intriguing and occasionally very disturbing true crime cases. Everything we say in our podcast is information that we have gathered through testimonies, interviews, documents, and trustful sources. Any opinion we say is our own. If we get any information wrong, and to be honest, today's case is maybe one you might want to take away and do your own research on, because it goes deep and I'm truly only kind of covering the surface level. You could spend a good long time just reading about it. For the sake of brevity, I'm not going to be covering it as in depth as what I've looked into, but just know it goes deep. Of course, you're more than welcome to join us in a discussion in the comments. We mean no disrespect to the victims or anyone affected by this case. We also have a Google form in our description where you can go and recommend what case you would like us to check out if you have any cases that you desperately want to hear about. With that being said, we're going to be discussing the Keddie murder. Before we get started, I just want to discuss there's going to be some child murder and it's still not proven in the court of law, so everything I say is alleged. And I'm allowed to have my own opinion. If I say, this person's a little suspicious, that's my own opinion and I'm allowed to have it. With that being said, let's get into it. So this all started because a family wanted to get a fresh start. So in July of 79, Glenda Susan, who went by Sue, Sharp, who was born March 29th, 1945. She embarked on a journey from her home in Connecticut, seeking a fresh start for herself and her 5 children, following the separation from her husband, James Sharp. Sue made the decision to relocate to Northern California due to how close it was to her brother, Don. This move was supposed to be a new chapter and a chance for stability and peace in their different environment. Upon arriving in California, the family initially settled into a small trailer in the trailer village in Quincy. It was a property that her brother had previously occupied. However, by the fall of that same year, Sue happened to find a more suitable and significantly larger residence in House 28 of the Keddie Resort. As you can imagine, having 5 kids in a trailer isn't ideal, so she jumped on this the instant she found it. This house was situated in the rural Nevada rail town of Keddie, much like today's case is titled. It had become available after the county sheriff, Sylvester Thomas, vacated the property. So you're probably thinking, all right, a police officer or a sheriff just vacated the house. It's probably pretty safe where they're going to be going, right? It seemed like the community that they were moving into was a safe, close-knit community. However, it just shows that terrible people lurk in all sorts of places. So Sue moved into cabin 28 with her children, and her children were John, who was 15, Sheila, who was 14, Trina, who was 12, and her 2 younger sons, Rick and Greg. So, like we said, this all started in April. So up until now, they'd been living in Keddie, everything was going fine, and April 11th began like any other. It was a normal Saturday for the Sharp family. In the late morning, around 11:30, Sue, who was accompanied by her 2 children, Sheila and Greg, drove from the home of their friends, the Meeks family, to pick up Rick, who was another one of the kids, who was attending a baseball tryouts game just like in a field in Quincy. During their drive, they came across John, who was one of the kids, and his friend Dana, and they were hitchhiking at the mouth of the canyon that led from Quincy to Keddie. So the boys later were given a ride back to Keddie, which was a journey of approximately 6 miles. A couple of hours later, around 3:30, John and Dana were still trying to hitchhike to Quincy, and they were trying to make plans to meet with their other friends. People observed them walking around the downtown area around at this time, and this was perhaps their last public sighting. As the evening approached, the family made arrangements for the night. Sheila had plans to spend the night with the Seabolt family who lived in the adjacent house on 27. She left the house at 8 to do so. Meanwhile, Sue remained at the home with her younger sons, Rick and Greg, and their young friend, Justin. A critical detail emerged when Trina, who had been watching TV at the Seabolt house, decided to return back to her home. She asked for the time and then left the Seabolts at 9:30 to head back home. This seemingly tiny decision to return home would be so insurmountably significant. Later allegations would suggest that Trina witnessed the whole thing and was subsequently killed to prevent her from identifying the perpetrators. So, whatever happened that night. In the morning of the following day, April 12th, 1981, at approximately 10 a.m., Sheila Sharp returned home after spending the night at the Seabolts. What she discovered upon entering the living room would haunt her forever. As soon as she opened up the door, she was met with the sight of her mother, Sue Sharp, her brother John, and John's friend Donna, dead on the floor. The crime scene was horrific. All 3 victims were found in the living room, and they had been bound by medical tape and electric cords, which, to me, at least, indicates deliberate and controlled act of violence. Someone wanted to do this. This was premeditated. You don't just tape up someone because you feel like taping up someone that day. Blood spatter evidence confirmed that the murders had all taken place within this room. The natures of the injuries inflicted was cruel and very vicious. Sue had been found lying on her side near the sofa. She was nude from the waist down. She had been gagged by a blue bandana and her own underwear, and she was secured with tape. Her injuries include stab wounds to the chest and a horizontal slash across her throat that passed through her larynx and nicked her spine, pretty much decapitating her. An imprint matching the butt of a Daisy 880, which was a BB pellet rifle, was also found on the side of her head. Autopsies later determined her death was from her stab wounds and the blunt force trauma. John, the child, had his throat slashed, and he also sustained blunt force trauma to the head caused by one or more hammers, says the autopsy report. His death was attributed to these knife wounds and the blunt force trauma. Dana suffered multiple head injuries and was strangled to death, but from the blunt force trauma to his head, it was also suggested that he died from the multiple hammers, or it could have been the asphyxiation. So you're probably thinking, damn, okay, pretty much everything under the sun happened to these people. They were blinded, gagged, there were multiple weapons used on the same people. Clearly, at least for me, this indicates a targeted and personal attack. This deliberate brutality, combined with the fact that the three children, Rick, Greg, and Justin, were found physically unharmed in an adjacent bedroom, suggested that they were almost selected. Sue, John, and Dana. But why them, especially when the other ones were just chillin'? Adding to the immediate chaos and challenges for the investigators, Trina was also absent from the home. Upon discovering the scene, Sheila rushed back to the Seabolt's house. Jamie, who was a member of the neighboring family, retrieved Rick, Greg, and Justin through the bedroom window. Jamie later admitted to briefly entering the house through the back door to check for survivors, which, I mean, is understandable, but potentially contaminated the crime scene. But really, I think it wasn't that bad based on what happened. Evidence also found 2 bloodied knives and 1 hammer at the scene. So we have multiple people dead and the absence of a 12-year-old girl, Trina, from the crime scene. Immediately, the investigation kind of took a backseat to the abduction. The FBI immediately became involved, treating Trina's disappearance as a kidnapping. However, by April 26th of the same year, the FBI withdrew from the search, stating that the California State Department of Justice was handling the case adequately and their continued presence was deemed unnecessary. So their early withdrawal in this case and kind of like dropping it halfway, not even halfway, not even a quarter, like it just didn't help the investigation any some, and there wasn't a lot of coordination between the multi-agency. But despite having a grid pattern search, which is kind of atypical for looking for abducted children, especially in the area that they were in, they covered a 5-mile radius around the house with police canines, and despite this, the efforts proved useless. Trina remained a missing person for 3 years. Her fate was finally revealed, incidentally, on April 11th, 1984, exactly 3 years to the day after the murders, when a bottle collector made a grim discovery. Looking for bottles, they'd actually found the part of a skull and a mandible near Camp 18, which was just off of Feather Falls in neighboring Butyl County, which was approximately 64 miles from Feather Falls, which was closer to where they were. In June 1984, a forensic pathologist confirmed that these remains belonged to Trina. So either she was killed around where she was murdered or moved around, but either way, there was a deliberate kind of action to hide her body. A critical piece of information regarding Trina's remains emerged much later. Shortly after the discovery was announced in 1984, County Sheriff's Office received an anonymous phone call identifying the remains as Trina. However, this critical call was not documented at the time. A tape recording of this anonymous call was discovered sometime in 2013 to a deputy assigned to the cold case. When they found this buried at the bottom of an evidence box, they noted that the failure to document and act upon this anonymous call could have provided vital leads much sooner and potentially how would this people have known this was Trina, Is this a call from the killer? Maybe. This oversight, along with the FBI's disengagement and the unsuccessful initial searches, and it was grossly small in the grand scheme of things, paints a picture of just how this case continues to be unsolved. So, the initial investigation into the Keddie murders was marked by inconsistencies and questionable decisions that would later jeopardize the case. The Seabolt family, who spent the night with Sheila, reported hearing no commotion from cabin 28 during the night of the murders. This stands in stark contrast at the account of the couple living in the nearby house of 16, who stated they awakened during the night at approximately 1:15 a.m. to what sounded like muffled screaming. These conflicting witness accounts immediately presented a challenge for the investigators. A key witness was Justin Smart, the young friend who was unharmed in the house. Justin initially provided conflicting stories about what happened that evening, even claiming to have dreamt about some of the details of the murder. Later, under hypnosis, which again is highly debatable, questionable that they went that route, but sometimes it helps. He offered a different account, stating he had seen Sue with two men. The reliance on hypnosis and the changing statements was weird, especially because this was a kid. Based on Justin's descriptions, they were able to make sketches of the two unknown men. However, the artist chosen for this, his name was Harlan Embry, had no artistic ability and training in forensic sketching. Even though they had access to the top forensic artists, both from the Justice Department and the FBI, they still went with Joe Schmo. The description of the suspects were described as being in their late 20s to early 30s. One was between 5 foot 11 inches to 6 foot 2 inches, who was tall, with dark blonde hair, and the other was between 5 feet 6 inches and 5 feet 10 inches, with black greased hair. Both were said to have worn gold frame glasses. So immediately the investigation focused on potential suspects within the immediate vicinity. Justin's stepfather, Martin Smart, who was a neighbor and the main suspect for a majority of what was happening in the case, claimed that a claw hammer had gone inexplicably missing from his home. This detail immediately linked him to the potential murder weapon. Detectives interviewed numerous locals and neighbors, including members of the Seabolt family, and recalled seeing a green van parked at the Sharps' house around 9 on the night of the murders. Despite early rumors, County Sheriff Doug Thomas quickly dismissed theories. This case gets wild. So, he stated in the weeks following the murders that no drug paraphernalia or illegal drugs were found in the home, which narrowed the scope of potential motives. Weird. So, for decades following the initial flawed investigation, the Keddie murders case largely went cold. There was still a physical reminder of the tragedy, the cabin 28, which was ultimately demolished in 2004, which symbolically closed a chapter, but did little to resolve the actual case. Eventually, in the 21st century, they would start reevaluating and bringing forth new leads. Special investigator Mike Gambard became involved in the case after 2013, and he was very vocal about getting more support in this case. In a 2016 interview, Gambard stated, "You could take someone just coming out of the academy, they would have done a better job." So he was passionate about finding the killer. Or killers. A significant focus of the renewed investigation focused on Martin Smart, who was Justin's stepfather and neighbor, who was originally considered to be the main suspect, if you remember. A 2016 article in the Sacramento Bee brought light a chilling letter that Smart had sent to his wife Marilyn shortly after the murders. He was down in Reno, Nevada. In this letter, he initially discussed their marital struggle, in which Smart concluded with the disturbing statement, "I've paid the price of your love, and now I've bought it with 4 people's lives." What? Excuse me? Who? What? That's just way too... That's crazy. crazy talk. Crazy coincidence. Whose lives are you talking about? I mean, I can't even see a hypothetical where it's like, oh yeah, I just bought 4 people on the dark net, or oh yeah, that was 4 Webkins I bought. Those were 4 kids that I stole their stuffies from. I don't know. Like, that's crazy. Gambard confirmed that this incriminating letter was overlooked in the initial investigation, and that's in heavy quotations, overlooked. It was never admitted as evidence. Furthermore, a counselor whom Smart regularly visited, later alleged that he'd admitted to the murders of Sue and Tina, though claiming he didn't have anything to do with the boys. He reportedly told the counselor that Trina was killed in order to prevent her from identifying him, as she had witnessed the whole thing. This alleged confession directly supports to kind of why we thought Trina was initially taken. Another individual of interest was Bob Boobeed. Boobeed? Oh jeez. Boobeed. I'm gonna say that. Who was in the same neighboring community as Smart. Boobeed allegedly had ties to organized crime in Chicago. However, his death in 1988 meant that any prosecutions against him became impossible. That's not where the case ends, though. A major breakthrough occurred on March 24th of 2016 when a hammer matching the description of the one that Martin Smart claimed to have lost was discovered in a local pond. This hammer was promptly taken to evidence by Mark Gambard, bless him. So the location meant that it intentionally had to be put there. There's no fucking way you're gonna accidentally misplace a hammer in a lake. The most promising development was announced in April of 2018 when Gambard stated that DNA evidence was recovered from a piece of tape at the crime scene. It matched a known living suspect. This discovery of Smart's letter, which explicitly linked him to the deaths, combined with his alleged confession and the circumstantial finding of his hammer, along with this possible DNA breakthrough, hopefully will lead to a tangible path to resolution after decades. Despite the significant new evidence and the renewed investigation efforts, the Keddie murders officially still remain unsolved. The case continues to stand as California's most infamous cold case. Like I mentioned, the physical site of Cabin 28 was physically demolished in 2004, but there's still a scar that remains on the community and the children that survived, particularly Sheila, who saw her parent and her brother that day. She still tirelessly fights for answers and tries to bring support and awareness to the community and to eventually bring justice. And that's kind of where we're at in today's case. There's still no justice, but there's still the dedication of one investigator who is hell-bent on figuring out this case. And I hope maybe one day, almost 5 decades later, we'll have justice. But let us know your thoughts. And I hope eventually we get some justice and a follow-up on this case. If we do, we'll make sure we pin it in the comments. And yeah, we'll see you in the next episode.